Hi, welcome to Business Bites. My name is David Tighe, the Managing Director of Bauer Media in Northern Ireland. And each week we take a look at some really interesting characters and we try and understand and learn and get some insight into their world. This week, I'm really pleased that my guest is Anthony Miller, who's a media commentator, but there's so much more to Anthony than the job title that's on the screen. So Anthony, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, David. Yes, you would need probably a billboard underneath there to do all of my job titles.
Well, I'll tell you something. Let's get into the conversation because the story that you have is a fascinating one, and I'm sure there is much to be learned from you being brave enough to tell your story, which you have done in many areas, including a TEDx talk that's available online. So Anthony, you've said in one of your conversations that people shouldn't really be defined in their life by their job or their job title. Can you just give us a little bit more around what do you mean by that, and what context have you got for that conclusion?
Yes, well, I think we all kind of grew up. From a young age, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, and we have the stock answers: fireman, teacher, that sort of thing. But I think we begin this mindset that we're defined by what we do and also by what we earn. And success it's actually quite a subjective thing. What I consider success and what you consider success can be completely different things. But generally, society as a whole has kind of got locked into what you do for a living, what do you earn, what kind of house do you have, what kind of car do you drive. So I suppose because of the varied type of jobs that I've had in my life, I've enjoyed great successes, but they didn't always necessarily mean that I had a massive bank account. And they were successful because I was having a ball, I was doing well, I had notoriety for what I did. And it was all great, but of course what goes up does come down as well. And if you're defined by what you do for a living and it can be taken away from you, then so can all of you. And that's dangerous. That's an unhealthy place to be.
Okay, and of course you mentioned the different roles that you've gone through in your life, and really interesting to hear your story. Everything from running kind of bars through to wedding planning. And through to your media commentary stuff, and I'm sure quite a bit more in between. Talk to me about your story in brief. You left school, and school was a bit of a challenge for you, but it didn't define you, did it? Or did it?
Well, it did for a while. I suppose I was always quite clever, is what the school always said, but I just didn't fit the template. I went to what was, I would say, quite a strict Catholic school, but I also went to a Protestant youth club, which is, in Northern Ireland, that's a significant thing to talk about. And I find that at school, people were trying to bottleneck me into being a certain way, whereas at youth club, they were encouraging me to be myself, and they were giving me responsibility and giving me opportunities to express myself. And I think it was there when I first kind of started to get that self-belief that I don't have to fit into this, the square peg in the round hole. But I was expelled from school. So I left school with no qualifications whatsoever. And I was lucky that I was picked up by a modeling agency. And by the age of 21, I was managing that agency. But in between, I had been on tour. I'd worked as a model all over Ireland and as a dancer. So I got to see a bit of the world, and I met so many really interesting people and got an insight into how things work. And education is important, but there's other routes to success.
So if you're, I suppose, where you are now and you're looking back at that young Anthony, perhaps if you're an employer bringing someone in straight from school, what advice would you be giving that person now, looking back?
I think, the hashtag that I've used for my TED Talk is good enough for me. So make sure that you're putting yourself forward for things that are good enough for you, not to undersell yourself, but also not to oversell or try to be meeting other people's standards. And as well, for employers is to recognize the talent that is coming through the door and deal with it appropriately and put it in an appropriate place. Lots of people, we have lots of learning difficulties that we weren't aware of back in the day that are now at the forefront. So things like ADHD, those people may be hyper focused or may need things that change a lot. So it's just being aware of who you have in front of you and using them to the best of their ability in order for you to get the better outcome.
And I suppose, does this involve, not looking at people through your own lens or your own lived experience? It's a challenge for some people, isn't it?
Yeah, it is really hard because, well, we all have our own inner critic, our own inner voice that tells us who we're supposed to be, and what we're supposed to achieve. And that's influenced by our parents, our peer groups, people that we do business with. And we do reflect that onto other people, particularly our colleagues or our employees. And we're relying on these people for the successful turnaround of our own business. So we're at risk of maybe dumping our own insecurities and fears onto people. So I suppose just taking that step back and like I said before, looking at what talent you have there. I mean, I think everybody has talent. Everybody has something to offer. So utilize that, look deeper for it. And for the people there, the employees as well, to be able to come forward and say, look, this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm interested in. And to try not to find themselves in jobs or careers that are not right for them, because eventually that's going to affect your mental health.
What about being brave? Because some people get into something and they think that that is what they want. Then they realize that perhaps it isn't quite all that it's supposed to be. But some people get in too deep and can't make that switch, and it's a scary place to be. Have you had that experience? If so, what did you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a liar that would say that they haven't found themselves challenged or confronted in their own careers and their own lives. But the definition of bravery is doing something despite the fear. So feel the fear and do it anyway. So don't be afraid to come off track, to change, to start again. Look at Madonna. How many times has she reinvented herself, right? So it's okay to have another go, and keep having another go. There is no limit on how many goes you can have, and each experience that you have, it's not a failure. It's not that you need to be written off. It's you've had a go. Stand on that. Use that as a step up to the next thing.
What about battling that inner voice that we mentioned? Any tips or any thoughts on that inner voice, the inner critic?
It's really tough. It really is tough. What I found, a way that worked for me was actually just writing things down. When you put things external and you can look at them externally, it's easier to order them. But everybody will have their own way of dealing with things. But for me, writing things down, writing lists. My friend who's a counsellor reminded me that you can't have two thoughts at the exact same time. So if you can find a way of, whenever you have that negative thought, replacing it with a positive, through time, that should help to change. Now, again, this is something that you don't just do in 30 seconds. It's something that you do over a period of time. But to keep trying to turn that negative around in your head into a positive and reminding yourself that actually you're okay, you're a pretty decent person and you've got this far, so why not keep going?
And Anthony, as a young boy at school who he probably gave the teachers some challenges, I understand education is very much where you're at the minute. You're about to qualify, if I have read the information correct. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm just about to qualify as a barrister. I'm also training as a civil and commercial mediator. And I work as a university lecturer. Now, if you had asked any of my teachers at the time, would I have worked or even been anywhere near education, they would have laughed in your face. So it's quite poetic, I suppose, that I've ended up actually working in education. But wow, what a job, what a lovely, lovely job. And the insight that I get into people's lives is just amazing, heartbreaking, amazing, and also really rewarding.
Well, I think absolute proof that never be defined by your job role or indeed how you do at school. There's a big future out there for everybody. I think it's a great lesson for employers to learn as well, that that person in front of you could be a million different things, not just what you're thinking. Anthony, it's been an absolute pleasure. We're out of time already. More details on your website?
Yes, visit me at www.anthonymiller.co.uk.
It's been our pleasure to meet you this week. Thanks, Anthony, for being our guest.
Thank you, David.